Hello and welcome to Back and Board. I'm Mike. This is my beautiful wife Tabitha. And today we have decided, after last week's video of the power of fear and imagination, we're going to talk about the power of forests and imagination. And the friendship and bond a tuna sandwich can bring together.
Yes.
Because tigers are stupid that way. With that said, we're talking about Calvin and Hobbes. And I know Calvin and Hobbes is one of my favorite comics of all time. It doesn't matter if it's in a syndicated strip, a monthly, a graphic novel, whatever. Calvin and Hobbes.
A collection of works.
Yes.
Yes.
Calvin and Hobbes is arguably one of my favorite, most personal books I've ever read. Calvin and Hobbes' imagination. This just goes hand in hand. Like last week when we talked about Stuff of Legends, we were talking about just the power of the dark and the fear that wells up in kids because of what we don't really know a lot. But Calvin and Hobbes celebrates the fact that we don't know a lot. One of my favorite moments is when he asks his dad if if dinosaurs were still around when he was a kid. And his dad just kind of looks at him and goes, okay, yeah, whatever. And his mom yells at him because he's doing bad enough in history as it is. But this idea that you don't know something, so it's something to celebrate. It's something that, as they end the strip,
yeah,
let's go exploring.
It's the excitement of exploration, as you already said. Yeah.
I don't know. I've always gravitated to this strip. I'm lucky that I got to read it on a daily basis when I was a kid. It definitely is one of those books that helped me read. Yeah, because you grew up with
that, because it ran from 85 to 95, right? Yeah, so that was your childhood.
It really was. I remember enjoying Garfield and Calvin and Hobbes. It's what I look for in the newspaper every day. I always loved the Sundays because, of course, they're in color. Everybody loves a color comic. But I really appreciate the black and white issues almost more than the color issues now because there's so much greater stories being told.
Well, I think it also taps into your inner imagination as well to just, you're not forced to see things in color, but when it's in black and white, you get to fill in that part, I think. Just my opinion.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Calvin and Hobbes. Let's take a small detour from talking about how much we love Watterson's creation, and let's talk about the names. John Calvin, which is where Calvin gets his name.
Yes.
This is your area. You love these little philosophies.
Okay, so, I was reading, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but there is a fantastic collection of Calvin and Hobbes, and it comes in a book collection.
I think there's a 2-book collection now. Mm-hmm. I have the 3-book collection.
3-book collection.
Makes it a little bit more wieldy.
Okay.
Readable.
So when you open up this collection and there is an epilogue, is it epilogue or prologue?
Prologue.
Prologue. Okay.
Kind of like an author's note. Introduction by Bill Watterson himself, and it details, in a short kind of summary, of 10 years of work, but he goes into explain how he came up with the names of Calvin and Hobbes. So Calvin, as he explains it, was named after John Calvin, who was the Protestant reformist. French, I believe, too.
Frenchman, yeah. So he's the one that broke away from the Catholic Church and, developed a different religion, which we have all these religions now from the Protestant movement. But yeah, so Calvin was a reformist, so you think about him, he probably was a revolutionary, didn't always go by what the status quo at that time was.
He was a very controversial figure during his time.
He had a fixed mindset and he went with it people did not change his mind. He wasn't impacted by others, he impacted other people, clearly.
Yes, so he was almost a zealot who, as cliche as it is, because you can say it for about both characters' names, walk to the beat of his own drum.
He did. And at the demise of others, because, when you believe in something that strongly, you are willing to, pretty much do anything. Yes. So Hobbes, who is a tiger, his name was influenced by Thomas Hobbes, who was a 15th and 16th century philosopher. Is that what we looked up?
I believe he was born in 1580.
Okay, so 16th century
16th and 17th.
Philosopher. And his philosophy was that he believed that man could not...
Man was selfish.
Yes, and so he needed leadership or some type of sovereign rule to make him do the right thing. And I can see those elements in the creation of Calvin and Hobbes. You think about how Calvin is, he definitely goes to the beat of his own drum. He doesn't do well with authority. He really does need someone to kind of keep he needs someone to help keep him balanced, which I think is the purpose of Hobbes. Hobbes is the more logical one. He keeps Calvin kind of from going too far, but he also believes in having fun too.
Yeah, and kind of in his own way. I mean, Hobbes is a very big aspect of selfishness. I mean, he admits he's a tiger. He does whatever he wants. He doesn't really agree, and he likes to throw other people under the bus. Tigers would destroy the grading curve. That's why they don't go to school. I get to stay in bed. You guys stay here. And then, of course, everybody... One of my favorite aspects that show up constantly throughout the whole series is, well, Hobbes tackling Calvin coming home from school.
Oh, yeah, that continuous storyline.
Yeah.
The expectation of where's the tiger going to come from this time.
Yes. So, as you can see, I'm sure as the strip and Waterston has admitted, they became more based off of aspects of his personality. He has commented repeatedly in, well, I can't say repeatedly because he's not a man of many interviews.
Right.
But he's talked about how deeply personal the strip did become. How Hobbes was his more laid back,
more logical side.
More willing to look and take life as it was, and Calvin was his ranting at the clouds.
Yes.
Calvin was his, why are we doing this just to do this aspect? And I don't know. There's something timeless about it, because we can all relate to either Hobbes or Calvin at any given time.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
Definitely.
So, it's interesting, though, of how he came up with these characters' names and just where he focuses on them. Because also Waterston, if I remember correctly, I could be wrong about this, went to college for political science. That was one of his callings in the 70s, and he decided that it just wasn't working out for him in that sense because he really wanted to be a cartoonist. Waterston himself is very much a man who laid it all on the table. Mm-hmm. Even though he is now known as a recluse, and it's really hard, I don't think anybody actually really knows outside of an NDA where he lives. He has become that much of a recluse in that aspect. He gravitated to two creators that has set a massive influence on him that really were creators that pushed themselves into their work. Charles Schulz is the creator of Peanuts, was constantly on record of talking about how each individual characters were aspects of his own personality.
And that's one of my other favorite comic strips is the Peanuts.
Peanuts
Gang. Peanuts. Yeah.
Which is really funny. I always thought of it as Charlie Brown, but Peanuts just never really... Pogo by Walt Kelly was a major influence for him. And these are strips that I have not read as much Pogo as I have of everything. I've kind of dabbled into it, so I can't talk to the influences that he pulled from that. Because it was very much well after my time. But it is talked about a lot when you go into strips like this. Mm-hmm. But I grew up on Bloom County, so I like Opus the Penguin. I like strips that are for multiple people. Calvin and Hobbes runs for children in that aspect, because it very much is written in that aspect for children, like they can grasp it, little tiny intricacies, but it's also...
I don't know, though, because when I went back to reading Calvin and Hobbes and some of the terminology that Calvin utilized, it wasn't, to me, like the childlike, simple concepts. I mean, he got pretty deep with some of his perspectives in his daily life.
People underestimate children.
Maybe you're right. Yeah.
Like I said, he uses Calvin's...
I guess it depends on what age of child you're referring to.
Yeah. I mean, when I think of child...
I guess a child, if it's age, I guess I'd look at it.
I think people really underestimate what children pick up. Yeah. I mean, I know I picked up a lot of things that people didn't expect
me to assume that you didn't understand.
My brothers did, but they picked up different things than I picked up. And I think every child is different in that aspect. But Calvin and Hobbes speaks to a lot of people. You have fun adventures, you complain about things, you complain about multiple, you form little clubs, and that is very relatable. Like, Calvin's language is not childlike.
No, it's not.
He uses words that are not, but how often or not did you read this strip and go, what does that word mean?
Yes.
Or ask?
Yes.
So it is written in that aspect.
Yeah.
But coming back to Calvin and Hobbes as an adult, as a teenager, as an adult, a young adult, and now I'm in my 30s, so I get something else out of this. I mean, there's very few comic strips that I can say that I have picked up something new every time I've read it at different stages of my life.
Yeah, I really enjoyed going back and reading it for this video to refresh myself with some of those strips.
Yeah.
There are a lot of them.
I mean
thousands of Calvin and Hobbes strips. And so to go back and pick up some of those nuggets and say, oh my gosh, yeah, that was pretty interesting. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Calvin and Hobbes is one of the most discussed. We are not groundbreaking anything here. There are college courses that are dedicated to the philosophy
breaking down
of Calvin and Hobbes.
Yes.
I mean, how, like, and I often wonder, because he doesn't give enough interviews, like, what are his thoughts on that? Like, does he think that people are overthinking it?
Yeah. I think, this is my just opinion, but I think he said in his own words that when he ended the strip in 1995, he had said all that he wanted to say. And so I think now it's just, he's given us this beautiful, timeless piece of himself. Mm-hmm. And now it's just however we want to interpret it, we can interpret it.
I'll agree with that, but I also think the beauty of this is, and he said it, he wanted to end it before it became routine.
Correct.
Is the fact of the matter is that it is so open to interpretation.
It is.
I mean, I like a work that has a definitive ending, but do you go back to it? Like, seriously.
Yeah.
Like one of the reasons there's certain books that I go back to, like Count of Monte Cristo. Like, it has a definitive ending, but it doesn't. Like, it ends. The Count gets his revenge in this aspect. Spoiler for almost 200-year-old book. But he gets his revenge in ways he didn't expect it, and he also has a chance for happiness. But we don't get to see how that happiness plays out.
Right.
Like, we don't know if the Count is capable of having that happiness. We don't know if he has remorse and it starts to eat him away. So there's always this openness. Yeah. Whereas, I don't know, I'm drawn to works that I want to go back and reread and maybe reinterpret your characters. Yeah. And Calvin and Hobbes is one of those.
But according to the introduction by Bill Watterson in his collection, his volume collection, he says at the very end, he says that when he stopped recording the lives of Calvin and Hobbes, his thoughts were that now they are free to live their lives. And I thought that was a beautiful sentiment, that he's created these characters and gave them this amazing story, and we were able to join them in their adventures, and now that he is done recording their story, they are now have been kind of like liberated to just be whoever and do whatever they're going to do. Right. And continue their adventures without any interference from us.
Or from him.
Or from him, yes.
Like, the ending of this series is that they're in the snow. I believe it actually was in December of '95 when he released his last strip. We're going into the new year, and Calvin and Hobbes are on a sled, and they're like, let's go on an adventure. Yeah.
Don't you have it behind us? Isn't that
I don't. I have
one
that
was the one.
Up.
Okay.
No, I do have a print of that final strip. Okay. But it is, to me, I agree with you in that aspect, but that's what I'm talking about. Like, there's an end, but it's not a definitive end.
Right.
Like, Calvin and Hobbes still have things to go explore. Yeah. We just don't get to be privileged.
Right.
To
the story continues. It's their story now.
Okay. So we have discussed the philosophy of this series and our interpretations of it enough. So, but one of my other aspects I love about this is the fact that, is Hobbes a tiger? Is he real?
That's the question, isn't it?
Because there are moments where everybody kind of sees Hobbes. Like, Hobbes shows up in places where he's not supposed to and the parents find him. But Calvin doesn't have a pet. One, because Calvin's parents wouldn't trust him with a pet. But how did Hobbes get there? I love this aspect of the series that Calvin and Hobbes are almost in on this big secret, but you don't know if it's just Calvin being Calvin or if it's Hobbes really kind of being this for a strip that is grounded on reality so hard, because it is. It's basically a strip about a kid's imagination. So it is very grounded. Like, we have fantastical elements. We'll talk about one of them here in a minute. But there's that slight fantasy element of it. Yeah. Not of a fantasy, but actual fantasy.
Fantastical. So the question is Hobbes part of Calvin's imagination, or is Calvin part of Hobbes' imagination, just a bored tiger in the jungle?
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
That a bored tiger knew what a tuna sandwich was. No, I mean, I love the idea that Hobbes is real, and that Calvin is the only one who can kind of see Hobbes for what he is. Because it explains so much, but then it also leaves us so much to interpretation.
Right, it's just unanswered secret throughout the entire story.
And I hope
special secret between Hobbes and Calvin.
Yeah, and I hope nobody ever finds out. It's one of those few things where I'm just like,
we don't want it answered. I don't want it answered.
I don't.
Yeah.
I love the aspect of it, and I love the childlike wonder of it, that because then it kind of comes into question some of my own memories. Like, I remember having some cool toys when I was a kid. Maybe not toys that were as awesome as Hobbes, but I had these like imaginational, these conversations with certain things that, you know, I think everybody does. At least I hope everybody does. Otherwise, I'm kind of crazy. But I think that's where we're gonna kind of bring this into is the child perspective of Calvin is that he doesn't know anything, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Because it is so amazing not to know anything. I mean, because then you can do things with cardboard boxes. I love the fact that we can keep this. It's such a running thing for childhood, is that cardboard boxes are amazing.
They are amazing. I remember when my parents brought me the Barbie townhouse. Even this huge box. And I remember I made it into a ship. I actually made a house out of the box. But think about it, making a house out of the box that a house came in.
Yeah.
But it was like, you know, when you're a child, you don't have these rules of people telling you what's not possible. Your mind just thinks everything is possible, anything and everything.
I mean, we could talk about how much imagination is ruled by fear, but imagination is also fueled by this wonder of not knowing everything too. I love that in this series that the box becomes so many things. It becomes a spaceship. It becomes a time machine. I'm gonna mispronounce the name because I don't have it visually spelled for me, but it's what is it, transmorphifier? When Calvin goes in and he duplicates himself, or he turns himself into a tiger, or he turns himself into a dinosaur. But because he drew a little dial on it and he can set the settings.
If you can't remember what it is, comment below.
Yeah, I'll have to relook it up. I can't think of it right off the top of my head. So I mean that childhood perspective, and I think it even is more emphasized that the fact that he had such a wonderful backyard behind him. Yeah. Like, because you can't really you can kind of pinpoint where Calvin lives, at least in a general area.
Yeah.
Because only certain areas in the U.S. have that. But I love the idea that you can't actually say when Calvin and Hobbes is. There's a few things now that have started to date the strip.
Like the television.
The television.
Right.
His parents are obviously wealthy enough that his car isn't quite up to standards.
Right. And I'm trying to think if his mom ever used a cell phone. I can't remember.
I don't know. I'm sure there's like house phones in it, so that kind of dates it a little bit now too. Yeah. But I know for the longest time you couldn't really date where this was. Calvin could just be this kid who just doesn't really like inside entertainment. I mean, one of my favorite things is when he lets his mom catches him going up to his room in the second floor in his winter clothes, and she looks at him and goes up and finds that he's opened his windows to build a snowman in his room. And we could talk about the snowmen much later on. The snowmen are one of my favorite aspects of this series. But so he has this wonder, like, well, nobody's technically told me I
couldn't do it.
Calvin lives off of this idea of, well, until I get in trouble the first time, I'm just gonna kind of
I'm just gonna go with it.
I'm gonna go with it. And that's it's such a joy, because it's also it's relieving to know that we can do that. Like, we get held back the older we get because we find out we know so many things. We get held down and we get anchored down.
Right.
But sometimes that childlike perspective is what we need. And Calvin and Hobbes, I think that's one of its lasting aspects, is that it teaches all of us it's okay.
Yeah.
Take the jump.
Yeah.
I mean, Watterson admitted that for a new cartoonist, you don't quit your day job, because cartoons in newspapers don't usually make it past 2 or 3 years. The ones that make
several reasons.
Yeah. You know, they couldn't get enough papers to buy in. The artist burns out through the ideas really fast. Like, there's several reasons that aspect, but he, at one point, so he kept doing his other job. He was just doing it at nights and the weekends. And then he's like, I'm making just as much money doing this as I'm doing my other job. Well, I'm just going to jump in. I'm going to do it. If I fail, I was going to fail either way. I'm not actually, I can always go back to my old job.
Right.
But that's Calvin. That is so much a Calvin move.
Right. Yeah, just on his own philosophy about life. Yeah.
I mean, they literally Calvin creates a sports game because he hates sports that literally has no rules. Calvin Ball is awesome. So, anything else you want to talk about?
No, it's a great script and very much a part of my life even now, to go back and reference to what Calvin and Hobbes would do.
Mm-hmm.
And just losing that fear and just remembering what it was like to be a kid and to not have the fear of not taking the step and just doing it because something you like and something you enjoy and it's fun.
It is.
Yeah. And just getting back some of that childhood magic back in your life.
Yeah, I mean, I can honestly say that if I see a reprint of Calvin and Hobbes in the paper, I will go to that reprint before I read any comic strip.
Yeah, definitely the first one that you go for. That we go for.
But, and this is definitely not going to be the last time we talk about Calvin and
definitely
Hobbes.
not. Definitely not. But there's so much to talk about with Calvin and Hobbes.
Like
so many layers.
This is a series that has its own college courses dedicated to it. And we are not college professors. At least I'm not a college professor for that area. But, so we will talk about this. Calvin Hobbes will be referenced multiple times. And if you haven't read it in a while, just grab a collection, because it doesn't matter where you grab, Calvin and Hobbes will be there, and they'll be up to something. Well, that's all we can talk about Calvin and Hobbes today. It's definitely not going to be the last time we talk about them. We both love this series enough that I reread it at least every couple of years. The whole series. It takes a minute to get through it. But if you want to leave a comment below, talk about your favorite strip in the series, or maybe your favorite newspaper strip when you were a kid that you liked. Like I said, I like Bloom County, I like Peanuts.
Garfield.
Yeah. And there's many more other ones. I still read Sunday paper strips when I get a chance. So they're always great. Well, sometimes great. But I would recommend it. Outside of that, do the other normal YouTube things. Like, turn on the notification bell, subscribe to the channel, and if you have a chance, whether it's right after this is posted or even if you stumble across the video later on, go ahead and go outside and just explore a little bit. This has been Bag and Boarded. I hope you have a great day.
See you next time.
Bye.